Respectfully, though, when you talk about that action coming quickly, it has not. This grocer code of conduct has been in the works for years. You announced, as we referenced in the introduction, Minister, that you would attempt to accelerate it through that pressure back in the fall. It's been more than 8 months.
This has been, bubbling up to the surface in news of late, and our good friend Mr. Champagne went on CTV News to talk with Vassy Kapelos about this, and this is how that went.
Start today with the cost of groceries, which remains a top concern as an affordability crisis keeps Canadians in its grips. After months of pushback, Loblaw says it's ready to sign the Grocery Code of Conduct, or the Grocer Code of Conduct, describing a revised version of it as now, quote, fair. The Code of Conduct aims to provide guidelines for fair dealings between grocery retailers and their suppliers, but it's only voluntary, and not all of the 5 major grocers have signed on. It's also one of the measures the feds pledged to accelerate back in the fall as a way to help stabilize the cost of groceries. The move from Loblaw comes as some Canadians are boycotting all Loblaw-owned stores in response to high food prices, but the company says its announcement has nothing to do with those demands. So once in place, will a code of conduct really impact your grocery bill, and is more foreign competition on the way? Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne is with us now to answer those questions. Minister, great pleasure to see you as always. Thank you for making the time.
Well, it's great to be with you from Quebec City today.
Yes,
so, real pleasure.
Glad to have you from Quebec as always. Minister, I wanted to start off on the question of the code of conduct. The news from Loblaw comes at the same time as we know that Walmart is still holding out. And Loblaw predicated its signing on to the Grocer Code of Conduct on all its competitors doing the same. Are you involved in any discussions to try and compel Walmart to sign on?
No, you know me, Vassy. Of course we are. We've put pressure on Loblaws for months now, and we were very clear with them that whether they would sign on to the Code of Conduct voluntarily, otherwise there'd be legislation. So I think, the pressure we put, and consumers generally, we were pushing on them. And now, as you might expect, the pressure is full on Walmart and Costco to do the same. We want all the large grocers in the country to sign on to the Code of Conduct. In my meetings with the Independent Grocer Associations of Canada, those represent about 4,900 smaller players and some of the smaller retailers and those who are part of the ecosystem. This is all about fairness and transparency. And we're going to put the pressure, and I call on them now. I mean, we're together. We've been reaching out to Walmart. I'm reaching out to Costco to say, listen, this is not a matter of choice. Consumers, Canadians, expect you to sign on the Code of Conduct, and we want you to do that very quickly. And we're going to keep the pressure on them.
They want Walmart and Costco to sign very quickly. They've been putting pressure on Loblaws this whole time, or else there would be legislation. So keep that in mind, because it's a running theme through the rest of the few minutes, in that if you don't sign willingly, we will legislate you to sign.
So do it already.
Okay. So what have you been waiting for?
It sounds like when Jagmeet says, he'll pull his support from the Liberals. Do it already.
Oh, right.
Do it already.
We're using that power to make the Liberals do what we want. Oh, okay. So
then why aren't they doing what you want?
So therefore, everything that has happened is by what Jagmeet wants. That's the only thing that Canadians can conclude from that, and this is why they've dipped below 17% in the polls for the first time. Anyway, let's continue. So remember, we'll threaten them with legislation.
You referenced just now the possibility of legislation, and I did want to ask you about that when you talk about applying pressure and what exactly that would mean, because the House committee that was looking into this did make a recommendation that there be essentially a law that would make it mandatory to compel these grocers to sign on. Is that a recommendation that you have formally accepted? Like, if they don't sign on, are you prepared to introduce legislation that would make it mandatory?
Well, listen, they will sign on. I mean, I have all faith that they'll do that. We've put pressure on Loblaws.
Put pressure on the Loblaws.
Well, listen, they will sign on.
And he keeps going, oh, and Loblaw signed on. Do you know how Loblaw signed on? They said, we will sign on if our competitors sign on. That's not exactly a hard sign on.
Well, and I think it's because they know that Walmart has no intention of signing on.
Right. So therefore, Loblaws won't sign on, and they can go, oh, well, it's not our fault. It's Walmart's fault. I wonder if it's because they were the ones that acquired Shoppers Drug Mart, which, like, even if you go into the cosmetics section, it's very expensive. They have a high markup on their cosmetics. Even on the few food items that they do carry in store, they have high markups. So I wonder if that is reflecting in their profit margins, and that's why everybody's going after Loblaws. I don't know. Like, I don't really care one way or the other. I just find it's interesting that Loblaws is the scapegoat above all the rest of them.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me because, again, the majority of the profits are from drugs and cosmetics. So if you buy a store that primarily sells drugs and cosmetics, then and then you were able to operationalize that store and reduce cost, you're sitting pretty.
You see the outcome. Obviously, I don't think it would be tenable for Costco or Walmart to disregard what the will of the government of Canada is and Canadian consumers. So we've been reaching out to them. We've done the same with Loblaws, but for me, Loblaws was really the one we need to convince to make sure that all the others would come on board. And like I said, now it's full pressure on the others to join, because that's the right thing to do. And they understand, as I said to Loblaws, and I'm saying it to you very publicly, Canadians expect them to do so, and they expect them to do so very quickly. So that's the nature of the discussions we have in the background with both Walmart and Costco.
Most Canadians don't even know what the grocery code of conduct is. And for him to sit there and say, Canadians expect them to sign the grocery code of conduct.
I'll tell you what, I think most Canadians, and us included until we were researching for this show, I think most Canadians thought that the grocery code of conduct was something relating to consumers.
Yeah.
How the companies should be behaving in regards to consumers and prices and things like that. It's not. It's a joke.
There is nothing in the grocery code of conduct related to pricing. There's nothing in there related to consumers. There's nothing in there that says that you have to make efforts to lower your prices. So when Champagne and these other guys come out and they say their grocery code of conduct will lead to lower prices,
how?
based on what? There's nothing in there. All it says is to play nice between the suppliers and make sure you have a written contract.
Do you know what? Something like this makes me wonder if it would actually make the prices go up. Because if you look at, for example, I call them the milk mafia. I think it's Dairy Canada, where they all kind of get together and set the prices for dairy products. And that's why you hear stories about farmers having to dump milk. It's because of the milk mafia, essentially. And I wonder if all these grocery stores getting together and kind of teaming up would create that kind of dynamic where they're going to price fix, essentially.
Well, it doesn't surprise me, because that would be almost the exact same model that the telecom quote-unquote giants in Canada have been operating on for decades. They all have relatively the same prices, and they're relatively, high gouging prices on Canadians, because you compare that, with cell phone plans just to the, to the US. If you know anybody who's an American and ask their cell phone plan, it's ridiculous.
Respectfully, though, when you talk about that action coming quickly, it has not. This grocery code of conduct has been in the works for years. You announced, as we referenced in the introduction, Minister, that you would attempt to accelerate it through that pressure back in the fall. It's been more than 8 months since that happened. Now one grocer has decided to change its mind. How can you be sure? You said the other two will sign on. My question, though, to you was whether or not, if they don't, you are prepared to make it mandatory through legislation. Can you answer that question specifically?
Well, I would say they were waiting in a way for Loblaws to come on board. And I would say when you have Loblaws who represent 30% of the market in Canada, I would tell you it seems to me untenable for either Walmart and Costco not to join the code of conduct, because that's what the industry wants. It's not just the government, it's not just the consumer, but that's what the industry wants. So Vassy, if we've been able to succeed collectively in pushing Loblaws towards signing, I'm very confident that we'll be able to do the same with Walmart and Costco. They understand that if they want to operate in Canada, they have to be part of the solution. I'm fairly confident that we'll get to where we need to be in a relatively short time period.
And I do certainly take your point, Minister, on time. But I think for many consumers and Canadians who are watching right now, I mean, they are struggling under the weight of how much those grocery prices have gone up, right? And it's against that backdrop that I'm asking the question, because what I interpret from your last two answers is that you are not willing to introduce legislation to compel them should those other two grocers not do what you expect them to do.
I love Vassy.
She's amazing.
No BS. All right, so you're not answering the question, so therefore you're not.
And I think that's what we said while we were watching it the first time around too.
Yeah.
When we were like screening it for the show. Yeah. We were just like, he's not admitting it, so.
But seriously, this is the thing, and to her point, you said that you're signing this quickly. It's been almost grocery prices have been jacking up since 2021. Gee, what happened right before 2021? Oh, right. A whole bunch of money entered the market that didn't exist before, causing hyperinflation. But, it's greedy CEOs that's the problem.
I want to read out this comment by D. Gillis because it's a very good comment. It says, not all items in the store are controlled by the store, like milk or bread or even chips. The price is set before it comes in. And that's absolutely accurate. As I had mentioned, the milk board sets their prices. They control how much milk there is, and they control that through multiple means. And if you remember a little while ago, I think it was in 2022, where Loblaws stores were not carrying Lay's chips.
Yep.
And that was because Lay's wanted to charge way more than Loblaws wanted to sell for. So sometimes the prices are not controlled by the store themselves. Sometimes they are set by the company selling the product. And the store essentially rents the shelf space.
Yeah, I remember it was just a whole bunch of miscellaneous Bob's name brand chips that were on the
on the shelves. Yeah.
Which, maybe that was a good thing because I didn't buy chips for that whole time. So, and I imagine, they lost a lot of revenue on chips and party related products.
But they did fill the shelves, and it got Canadians looking at other options other than Lay's brand chips.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen. We've been very clear that if it did not happen, but this was at the time we needed to push Loblaws. Now you're talking about two of the smaller players in the industry. So when you have the big players, when you have, Sobeys, Metro, and Loblaws, which are, market leaders in Canada, when you're down to the two others, all the indication that I have is that we will be able to achieve that. But I've always been clear on that, Vassy. All the tools of the government are on the table to make sure we reach that. Like you said, this is just one of the many things we've been trying to do. We still need to tackle food price stability. This is one item. It's going to provide fairness and more transparency. I can tell you there were a number of practices in the industry that I've learned when we engaged with independent grocers that were concerning. That code of conduct is going to help. It's a step in the right direction. It's not. That's not going to lead necessarily to lower prices in the short term, but at least it helps to stabilize prices, to bring more fairness, more stability.
So at the end, he finally says Sobeys and Metro. Sounds like they have signed on, as per what Fox said. But it's interesting that he's been very silent on them up until this point.
Well, after reviewing the quote-unquote code of conduct, it's no surprise that Loblaws, Walmart, and Costco don't want to sign on because there's nothing there. It's just fluff. Why would you sign on to that? It's essentially, I think this code of conduct is so that the government can pass off
that they're doing something.
Yeah, so that they can say, oh, look what we've done. We've done this code of conduct, and if it's not working, it's the grocer's fault. Meanwhile, it's the carbon tax that's raising prices. It's the increase in population that's raising prices. What else? What else are these grocers supposed to do? I'm not saying that they are perfectly innocent, but it seems like in this case, the majority of the cause of why groceries are so expensive has everything to do with the government.
Well, and it's pretty strange because The code of conduct, from what I can see, it seems to be favoring the suppliers over the grocery stores. Now, you can say that's a good thing. You can say that's a bad thing. But as it relates to that, what happens if the suppliers try to essentially hold the grocery stores, ransom, kind of like Lay's tried to do, and that way they don't get any food to Canadians. This kind of allows them to do that, and through filing this dispute, right? There's this dispute process. How long is that going to take? How long should it take? It's not laid out in the code of conduct. That's a problem. Because if a supplier has a dispute with one of the grocery chains, and they decide, well, I'm going to hold all of my product until that dispute is actually resolved. Well, what if that dispute takes months to resolve? That's a problem. And it's a problem because the grocery stores have to find other product in order to take that product's place, and they don't know how long that's going to take. So, again, when you're talking about supply chains that are borderline just-in-time delivery, like we talked about before, that's very challenging to navigate.